2016 is going to be the year of April not understanding technology. Okay, December is over. So, December wrap-up. I told you in my previous mid-December wrap-up that I only had 10 more books to read and I would officially hit 200 books for the year. I read 13. So that means I have 203 books for 2015. I think I pretty much just read for 2015. I did nothing else with my life. Maybe, possibly, but I'm okay with that. So if you want to learn about the first 13 books that I read for the month of December, you can go to the thing that I'm pointing at right now and click on the link and learn about those books. But now I'm going to talk about the last half of December and the 13 books that I thoroughly enjoyed and may not have enjoyed in the last 2 weeks. The thing that I started the last half of December with was this wonderful comic, this Star Wars comic about Princess Leia, written by Mark Waid and illustrated by Harry Dodson. I really like this. Maybe it's because of the fangirl in me, because Princess Leia is one of my favorite characters of the Star Wars franchise. I grew up idolizing this woman, even though she may not be real, I don't care. She was a strong female at the time for me. The story takes place between New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, in which Princess Leia is on a mission to find the remaining people of Alderaan and gather them together so they can just become a people again after the loss of their home planet. I really enjoyed this book. It was great to see this little episode of what could have happened between the two movies, and it doesn't help that the art was colorful. So I like this. I really like this. I then picked up Splinter by A.G. Howard, which is the first book in the Splinter series. This is a not necessarily retelling of Alice in Wonderland, but a continuation of Alice in Wonderland. It takes Alyssa and her family, the women seem to be cursed with the crazies. I don't know how else to put that. Most of the time they end up in asylums or in special homes because they start to hear voices and do odd, weird things. This stems from the legend that they were cursed because Alice, their great whatever, went to Wonderland and came back cursed, and so it has continued on since then. Now, Alyssa is starting to see some of this crazy that the female in her family seem to pick up, and it's her dealing with what that means and maybe being pulled back into Wonderland. I like this series. It was dark in the way I wanted it to be dark, because Alice in Wonderland to me has never been a light story. It's always been eerie and a little weird and a little dark and a little odd. It's always been Tim Burton style in my head. So with this book, it was all of that, and I really want to continue on with the series. And yeah, so that will be happening. I picked up book 2 of the Finishing School series, Curtsies and Conspiracies. This is the continuation of Fiona's and her experience at this finishing school and all the little adventures that happen around it. In this one, it's sky travel, faster travel, and the battle between vampires and humans with this technology. And it is just so fun. I like the way that she writes. It's character, she's got a fan in me, so I want to continue on with the Finishing School series and then move on to the Parasols and Protector series because it's great. Then picked up Dark Fever by Karen Marie Moning. I buddy read this with Joss over at Scribbles Reads, and I'm really glad that I read this with her. She was a great buddy read. I will link her channel down below, so you should check her out because she's awesome. But I was not overly impressed with this book. This is the story about Mac, who ends up going to Ireland after her sister is murdered and trying to figure out what happened to her sister. In the process, she's dragged into this fae battle. This is an adult book, and so I understand that things happen, but the Mac character just drove me nuts throughout this whole book. She was so wrapped up in clothes and everything else that I just started not paying attention to her. I'm not going to be continuing this series. I wasn't a big fan of how the faes were handled. I understand that they're dark creatures and they do a lot of dark things, but when you throw in a character like Mac, it just becomes a very dime store book, and I guess I was just looking for something more than that, and I didn't necessarily get it. I then picked up Spirited by Nancy Holder. This, for me, is officially the last book in the Once Upon a Time companion series that I've been slowly picking up and reading for like ever. And so I feel like this is an accomplishment because it's the last one. There's no more after this. This is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, Native American style. It's set in 1756. Of course, the British and the French are having their little spats, and the Native Americans are stuck in between, and they really trust nobody, and it's just all around bloodshed and chaos, and it's not pretty. And you can see how much this has affected the mindsets of all the people involved. Nobody believes anything good about the other people, and it's a mess. I really like how all of that plays together to create this nice connection between Isabella and Wanasamkin. I'm probably totally butchered that, and for that I'm really, really sorry. I like how it ended up coming together and becoming this thing in the Beauty and the Beast tie-in. It was interesting to see it from a Native American perspective. Then there was the utterly uninteresting and unadventurous tales of Fred, the Vampire Accountant. That is a mouthful. It is, of course, about a vampire accountant named Fred. Fred isn't a very good, vicious vampire. He's kind of one of those little hermits who just wants to stay home, drink his blood, and balance the numbers. In these short stories, we see Fred get pulled into these little minor adventures where we meet werewolves and government agencies, and things just get flopped together, and I giggled through this whole thing. Different take on vampire, and I really liked it. Like I said, if you need a fun, quippy little read, pick up this book. I then picked up Stray by Alyssa Sussman. This is the story of Elslyn, who is a daughter of a nobleman, and so is currently in, not necessarily a finishing school, but she's in a school in which she is learning to suppress her magical powers that women seem to have, but nobody wants them to use. It leads to badness, and they're taught to suppress it from an early age. And if they aren't, their fairy godmothers turn them in, and they usually end up as fairy godmothers themselves. Fairy godmothers are the girls who either don't find husbands or get turned in for using their powers, and therefore are stripped of all their titles, and all they can do is help the next generation suppress their powers. This was a very interesting read, because you have this culture that is trying to suppress women because of their power, and they're afraid of what this can mean, and the book made me frustrated. There were times I just wanted to chuck my phone across the room because I'm like, are you serious? Are you seriously doing this to your women? And for that, I really enjoyed this read, and I want to continue on with the series to see how things develop and how this world changes from this really women-suppressed society to whatever happens. I then picked up Obsidian by Jennifer L. Armentrout, which is the first books in her Lux series, which is about a girl named Kate who moves to a new town, and next door there are some pretty weird people who she, of course, befriends, and things start to happen. Yeah, that pretty much covered most YA books, but this book, I just connected so much with Kate. She is a book reader, she is a book blogger, and then she does not put up with any of Damon's nonsense, which I really like, who is one of the neighbors I mentioned in the synopsis. And so overall, I really enjoyed this book because I kind of placed myself inside of it, and I like when I can do that. This isn't a deep, profound read by any means, but it is a very entertaining read, and yeah. And there was A Wicked Thing by Rihanna Thompson. This is the first book in a series, and it is about what happens after Sleeping Beauty is woken up. This goes along the lines of some random prince wakes her up. She doesn't know him, so what can this true love thing really mean? And her trying to find her place in a world she hasn't belonged to in nearly 100 years, and she's expected to just get right back in, do what people tell her to do, and she can't handle that. It was a great take on Sleeping Beauty. It was interesting to see. However, I never really connected with most of the characters. I always felt like I was one step removed from the story. I do want to see where all of this leads to in the coming books in the series. It's really interesting to see her grappling with all of that. I then picked up Dorothy Must Die by Danielle Page. This is the story of Dorothy going back to Oz and pretty much screwing everything up. I wanted to enjoy this story because it was an interesting idea. However, I could never get into the story. Most of the time, I was just utterly frustrated with the characters and the plot and pretty much everything in this story. Nope. Just nope. I then read The Huntress of Thornback Forest, which is a mixed retelling of Robin Hood and the Swan Princess. It is a historical fiction retelling in which Odette is illegally hunting in the king's forest to feed the poor. In the process of doing all of this, she starts to question herself as she meets the new forester, and they start to develop feelings for each other and what it really means to feed the poor in a good way, and then other people vying for her attention and wanting to marry her because apparently she's this awesome person and her uncle is rich, so that helps. It felt unreal to me because Odette became this very Mary Sue-like character, and therefore that made her less real in my mind. And then there was the fact that she started to get very worn down from going out each night to kill deer in the forest for the poor, but apparently she hadn't been getting tired before the story started. There was a little disconnect from some of the plot points, but overall it was a nice, sweet, enjoyable read, especially for a younger audience. And then there was Harry Potter. Harry Potter. You all know this is by J.K. Rowling. I don't really need to say more than that. This is The Half-Blood Prince. Book number 6 in my reread with my roommate. I do really enjoy this book. I like to see where Snape kind of came from and the connections there. Of course, this one is the sad ending one. Not that the other ones don't have sad endings too, but this is the one that everyone grumps about because they got spoiled. I remember that when that first came out. I remember that. And it was good to go back into this world and read it. What was really great is for the New Year's, we decided to do a Harry Potter marathon leading up to midnight. And at midnight, we ended with this one right here. So that was good. Yeah. And finally, the most entertaining book of 2015. I hope you guys have noted my sarcasm. If you haven't, I am sorry. But I finally made it through this beautiful, beautiful responsive web book. Yep, it's been tabbed and all that stuff. I really won't go into this book very much because I'm sure most of you don't really care. This was just a whole bunch of different articles about web design in general and techniques and theology about what web design is and what it's doing and where it's going and my life right here in the book. Yeah. So that wraps up December in 2015. What was your favorite book of December? And what are your plans for 2016? I heart your beautiful faces. Bye.